Let's face it, the past few years have been an unprecedented mess. The weight of continuous, heavy issues, burnout, fatigue, confusion, stagnance. Sound familiar? What I decided to do was to have meaningful conversations with women I admire. It's the women in my life and yours that continue to thrive through whatever it is that life throws at them. I want to know, how are they doing it? How are they getting there? And how can I glean a little bit of their wisdom? This is that. And that's what she said. I am joined today by Paula Jordan. Paula, thank you so much for taking the time with me today.
Thanks for having me, Carin.
I have known you for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. You are one of the assistant superintendents in our district. That must be an incredibly busy position.
Yeah, it's a busy position, but it's also one of privilege for sure.
Absolutely, and it's such a one that you would work up to. But I want to sort of start a little bit before that, because before you can become a superintendent, you've got to start somewhere else. So take me a little bit through your journey. Did you become a teacher first? Is that the direction you were taking?
So you're not just talking about a little back, you're talking about way back.
Quite a bit back.
So yes, I started off as a secondary teacher, and I started my career actually in New Brunswick, and teaching political science and senior humanities, and then decided that I was looking more about having impact for students with respect to their social emotional well-being, okay. And so I moved into a counseling role. And after about 8 years in New Brunswick, my husband and I we were transferred out this way, and then continued on in a counseling role for a short period of time, and at that point moved into a vice principal role. And I was a vice principal at a secondary school at GW Graham actually for quite a long time,
okay.
For approximately I think it was 9 years.
And is that the position you came for from New Brunswick to Chilliwack?
No, good question. No, actually, we moved for my husband's work. So my husband is a member of the RCMP, and so he was transferred into the dog section. So he works as a canine handler.
Oh, cool.
And so we moved for his work.
Yeah. Oh, right. And because you had that universal flexibility of being a teacher, you didn't mind that's quite a big move all the way from New Brunswick.
Yeah, it was a big move. And after 8 years of teaching, having to come back and apply to be on the TOC list, it was a growing experience as well.
Humbling, I would imagine.
Yes.
So that's how that goes. If you take a position in another province, you've basically got to start again.
Yeah.
In a way, I guess, in a sense,
right?
You still have your
experience. Still carry your experience with you, and so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, did you always feel like you would want an administrative role, or is it something you grew into?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's something that I definitely grew into. I don't think I started off into teaching thinking that, oh yes, I'd like to be a site-based administrator or principal. I didn't. Yeah, it was just I think opportunities come along the way, and I've also had. I feel like I've been super blessed in that I haven't ever left a role that I thought, oh, it's time for me to move on to something different. I've loved every experience that I've had the opportunity to fill a role for a while and then be able to move on to the next.
Something that I noticed right away about Paula is her very positive and purposeful point of view on her past career endeavors, on opportunities that have come her way. You will often hear Paula extend her gratitude for things that she has experienced and for even her position in a given day. I love that positive approach. And it seems that you strike me as someone who is not afraid of a real change. And I guess that's coming from, you're initially from Ontario, and then you had the first move to New Brunswick. What's it like? I mean, as someone, when did you have your family? I guess I'm wondering too, because how does this all fit in having, 2 children, right?
Yeah, I do. Yes.
So when did they come into the mix?
Well, actually, quite a bit after our move. So once we had settled here, and Tucker was born in 2008. So we'd been here for about 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, before, and I was vice principal at GW Graham at that particular time.
Okay, so within 5 years of coming to Chilliwack,
yes,
you were already in a VP role. Okay, so what's it like being a VP with a newborn?
Yep, busy, but also I felt lots of support around the principal and our admin team at GW at that particular time. You know, Tucker was in the baby Bjorn, you know, the baby carry at the front as I was running up along the sidelines of the rugby field coaching, and he spent lots of hours napping in the medical room.
Wow, really?
The school. Yeah, and so there was lots of acceptance of, you know, finding some balance as a site-based administrator, but also being a mom.
Paula speaks of an acceptance of her colleagues at her school around her having her first child. And I know, you know, that experience has not been the same, even for some of the women that I've interviewed for this series. The fact that Paula was able to have colleagues behind her that, you know, accepted that. But then, on the other hand, Paula was that one going out there and saying, hey, this is how it's going to be because I've just had this baby and I want to be here coaching the rugby team or whatever the case may be. You know, it's a push-pull because Paula is this incredibly positive person who is going to make it happen. And you can choose to get on that Paula train and be part of that ride or not. It's kind of up to you, but she's going there regardless.
So that's so inspiring. Just hearing that you're able to make that work, you know, whatever sort of, you know, your baby Bjorns or your little mattresses or whatever. Talk to me a little bit about what you said here, this place of acceptance and welcoming. What does that look like, and what does a workplace sort of have to be welcoming to women with babies?
Yeah, good question. I think having conversations about it, right? Being open and having conversations around the difficulties and making some decisions around. So being a first-year vice principal and then having to have that conversation with your principal about needing to go on maternity leave the next year. That's not, it was
hard.
It was hard.
Did you ever get any of that? Like, well, why are you going for this promotion when you're having a baby?
There was none of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think for myself, it was those constructs that I had built for myself, and so I had to really break down those barriers.
That is interesting. You know, that's a theme that we often carry a lot of those inside of ourselves. So how did you do that? How did you break through that?
Well, I think just conversations with other women, right?
Yeah.
And knowing that, hey, this was the right path, and maybe along the way, upon reflection, not always, maybe the decisions that I had made at the time around maternity leave and how much maternity leave, I probably would make a different decision. Now,
okay.
Right. So my maternity leaves for both of my babies were quite short.
Okay.
And I felt like I needed to do that in order to continue to fill the role at the school. So I just think continuing to have conversations and be open and now I know we've talked a little bit about the importance of being role models for others that are coming and having babies of their own, right?
That is such a good point. And one of my most endearing moments of being on the school board so far was just one day that we had to be at the school board office all day, and your husband brought your daughter by because she was going to a dance competition or something like that, and you did her hair and you French braided. And for me, that was a huge moment. I don't even know if the other, if anybody else even sort of remarked on it, but for me, it was huge because I've also experienced that. Well, why do you have a baby if this is what you want to do with your life? And this real... It's like, well, I want to do both. Can't that be a thing? So I thank you for just going about your business that way, because it really showed me. What was it always like that for you in terms of just, here I am, I'm going to do my mom thing, deal with it?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was just part of this is how we're going to get everything done.
Yeah.
But I need to do it in partnership. So in partnership with the admin teams that I worked on. So sometimes it's like, hey, I need to duck out for 10 minutes, but I'll be back and know that, hey, the work's still going to get done.
Yeah.
And it's also in partnership with my person in this world, right? So
her person in this world. I absolutely love how she puts it that way. And you'll note here, just as our conversation proceeds, she will describe her partner, her husband, Mike, as someone who understands her, as someone who understands who she is as a woman in leadership. So yeah, pay attention to this next bit. It's very powerful.
I could not do the job that I currently do, or as a site-based administrator without Mike.
That's really cool.
I'm so blessed that he just picks up pieces. We have the Jordan conversation on Sunday evening about what the week's going to look like, and
Admittedly, that Jordan family conversation is something that I have been trying to replicate in my home since I had this interview with Paula. And let me tell you, on the weeks that I can remember to do it, it is amazing.
I love
who
that.
needs to pick up what, and
Okay. So this is a Sunday night thing between you and your husband.
it is where we print off the calendar.
Okay.
You know, that it's layered. It has Mike's calendar, my calendar, the kids' calendar, and
you guys just kind of touch base with what the week is going to look like. I would imagine that's incredibly helpful.
it's helpful.
Because now you have not just your son, but you had a daughter a few years later. How many years younger than your son?
It's approximately 3 years.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Jane's 3 years
So
younger.
Jane, and now how old are they? Both 15 and...
Yeah, good question. No, Tucker's 13 and Jane is 10.
Okay, so
yeah,
they're busy.
they're busy and they're so much fun right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, super fun.
Love this age, just the coming of age almost, and understanding what it means to be themselves in a way. Because I also sort of feel, and maybe you can tell me how you feel about this, is at 47, I'm kind of just waking up, I think, to who I am in a new way.
Yeah.
What are some of your thoughts or experiences in that?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, Karen, on that one for sure. I think going back to the superficial piece around the scheduling and Mike helping pick up the scheduling piece, it's also his support in that coming to understand who I am, also as a woman in a leadership role.
Yeah.
And I think about, I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. I'm not sure where you are with
Absolutely,
but
yeah.
she talks about that we're both map makers and we're travelers on those maps, and that so resonates for me and my journey in life, in that we have had people who have made impressions for us around who we have become, and it's also the research that we do. So we use those pieces to create our maps, and as we travel on the map, sometimes we get to the destination in a good way. Sometimes we have to take side streets and shortcuts, and sometimes we get a little lost. But at the core, if we know kind of what our why is, right, we can always find our way back. Right?
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's something that I've really noticed as well, growing a little bit older, is this, that if you have faith in yourself, that, even if you have to pause that map building for a bit, or however that might look, it's okay to just hang in there. That's really helpful. I want to learn a lot more about Paula's perspectives and all this. And also, I want to talk a little bit about the Culture of Joy book that you've brought along with some of your current work. We'll be right back after just a second.
Thanks, Karen.
We are back with Paula Jordan, and just before the break, we were starting to talk a little bit about your work and some of the themes that you're bringing into it. Can you share a little bit about this book that you've brought and what kinds of themes are in there?
Sure. So I think you asked me a little bit earlier, Karen, about what I'm passionate about, and so maybe we can leave the sport piece till a little bit later.
Okay.
But I'm passionate about in schools, underneath the umbrella of equity, really for me personally, is digging into the culture of joy and how we bring that culture of joy to schools. And I think it was probably 5 years ago when I was at Rosedale Traditional, Aaron Mackstocker, Aaron and I, we dug into this book by Dean Shersky, and he talks about the importance of the role that joy plays for not only students but also for the adults in classrooms, and that from his experience, it's been void. It's void, and so he scaffolds for us how we can bring that back. And it is about all of us doing a bit of investigation with respect to what are the gifts that we bring to the school each and every day. And I think that as women, sometimes we're remiss in talking about the gifts that we can bring to the table.
If by sometimes you mean every time, all the time, and every time that ever existed in history, then yes.
I agree.
And those, and it's important to start from that strength-based thinking and language in order to get to this joyful place. So it doesn't mean that, schools, it's full of laughter all of the time, but it's about experiencing joy. So persevering through something that's really tough. Do our students get to experience that? Or do our teachers get to experience that?
Yeah, and another layer, which I would imagine has been so complicating in this, has been the pandemic. What are some of the ways that you encourage this culture of joy during the pandemic? Were there any things that worked well or not so well that you can share with us?
Well, one is definitely around connecting, right? And how do we find those opportunities to be able to connect with one another in authentic ways, right?
Yeah.
So not just that check-in and check the box, right? But it's that authentic check-in and just to, to be able to share how grateful we are as we have the opportunity to come into a building every day, work with other amazing educators, and have the opportunity to help students grow into amazing individuals too, right? Become the people that they are going to become, that educated citizen. And more importantly to that, it's that well-educated citizen. How do they ensure that they leave our system as well individuals?
Exactly. It reminds me of that thing that happens in the plane where when the masks come down or something, if their masks come down, you're meant to put your own mask on and then help the others. And that it's sort of, I don't know why that metaphor jumped into my brain, but it was just like, how can we help or how can we hope to be effective educators if we are not effectively educated ourselves? I wonder, so take me through how you would establish a culture of joy. It sounds so great on paper.
I know.
What is it? What does it look like? When the kids show up at school in the morning.
Yeah, I think it's being visible. It's being able to greet them and do that 2-second check-in, right, at the very beginning of the day. And again, going back to that strength-based piece around ensuring that all students feel a sense of belonging and that they feel loved. Right. So I think, I know that.
Yeah, you do.
It was a couple of summers ago, I read The Tragically Hip, the autobiography of
Gord
Downie.
Nice.
Yeah. And there were a few things that resonated. One was around his affirmation that truth and reconciliation was the work that we needed to take on, and it was going to be a hard road, right? He says that specifically, but it is the right work.
Prophetic, yeah.
The other was around an interview that he had after his brain tumor had taken hold, and he was asked 2 questions. One was, why was it that his band was able? Or no, the first question was, why were people drawn to his music, right? What was it?
People were so drawn to
Tragically Hip music. And he says, because everybody's invited, everyone feels like they belong. Beautiful. And then the second question was, how is it that your band was able to stay together through all of those years, right? That's been unheard of. Over 30 years, right? This band stayed together. And his answer was really simple, because I love them and they love me. And so I really, that piece I carry with me. I feel like, wouldn't it be amazing if all of our schools and our school system, people entered and felt like they were invited, that they belonged, and that they were loved, right? And
it sounds like a dream. And I guess maybe then my next question for you would be, where do you think, and I know there's probably not a hard and fast answer, but where do you think Chilliwack is in terms of our ability to create those beautiful senses of belonging and joy in our school systems, in our schools?
In our schools.
Yeah, we have one system.
Yeah. I think it starts with the leader of the school,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It starts with our amazing principals and vice principals in our buildings. They have that, they create that culture, right? Or they have that daily opportunity, those interactions. And then our role at the board office, your role, my role, is to support them in doing that.
Absolutely.
Doing that work.
How do you think that many of your teachers, how do you think the pandemic impacted their lives and their work in terms of, not just establishing a joyful place in the school, but in terms of communicating with their students at all? What do you think were some of the challenges or some of the successes there?
Well, definitely one of the challenges is that there wasn't the relational collisions that you have on a regular basis, right? When we're learning from home over a screen.
New term alert. Relational collisions means opportunities to have relations.
And that's really difficult, right? And yet our teachers, our educators in our system, not just our teachers, our support staff as well, right, found ways in order to create those connection points, whether it was through a lesson or a phone call or a video chat, that occurred. But keep in mind that they're people in our system, right? And so their families were impacted by the pandemic as well. And so we're really having conversations about how do we, I don't want to use the word recover, but how do we take the pieces that we've learned from the pandemic and ensure that we don't lose those lessons and we take them in moving forward.
Yeah.
The pandemic was such a universally impactful issue. My headspace goes to thinking about the leaders like Paula, who are at the top of a system with so many moving parts. There will have been so many relational collisions and all kinds of things leading to the drama that was COVID. And someone like Paula, who has this calm, friendly, assertive, powerful presence, I can see how those characteristics would really have served her and, of course, our district as well during that time. Every echelon, every layer, or every partner group that had their own particular sets of quite traumatic issues during the pandemic had to still align with the district's goals and visions, and basically the act of getting kids through the school year. An incredibly difficult time. But with women and people like that at the helm, you can see how we manage to make our way through it.
That we just sort of keep building, keep going.
Keep going. Or we reminisce about, we hearken back to, hey, we just need to go back to normal, right? And I feel like that's a catchphrase now.
Good point. Because what is normal,
Right.
especially in a district like ours that is constantly changing and that
growing.
Is growing. Yeah.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the growth in our district and what does that look like for you as an administrator?
Well, it is super exciting, and so I'm not sure where to start, because we could start with the operational funding pieces. So Jerry and Al's pieces around, hey, do we have enough seats in schools for students?
Can we get them all to the school? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. To the how do we ensure that we are diversifying, right, in our buildings to meet the needs of all students.
Yeah. And I know, traditionally, I mean, and many, many decades ago, I guess you could say that Chilliwack was a place that didn't have a lot of diversity. And I know that nowadays that's just a totally different description. And so I'm loving the ways that we're pushing the boundaries out here and really changing the way that we approach some more of those difficult conversations. I know last year we changed our dress code to empower girls a little bit more. What were your thoughts as we moved through that process?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm not sure if it is pushing, when you say pushing the boundaries, I think it's around having conversations that shifts people's thinking.
Oh,
right?
nice.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. And
love Paula's use of the reframe here. And in fact, she's even schooling me. I'm learning all about how she's thinking about these things. So I said, hey, what was it like as we moved through this process to push the boundaries? And she's like, wait a sec, I don't even really think about it like we're pushing boundaries. I think about it like we have this opportunity to really get to the bottom of what people are thinking, and to maybe change those thought patterns to include, the real context behind what they're thinking and how they're acting. I love Paula's commitment to relentless, positive exchanges to get to the bottom of an issue. That's leadership.
So again, our conversation with respect to equity, right? That's the larger umbrella, and then underneath that is the truth and reconciliation work that's happening. And is gaining lots of momentum, and it's twofold, right? There's a groundswell piece, and there is now the ministry requirement with respect to graduation requirements.
Yes.
And so it's that pressure from the top, but also the hey, this is the work, this is the good work, and we need to move in that direction. It's conversations with respect to inclusion, and what does inclusion look like, and it is not just in a silo on its own with respect to our students who have diverse abilities, right?
Yes.
It's inclusion across the board.
It's almost redefining what we mean by inclusion. It's not, there's so much diversity that actually wasn't necessarily even acknowledged prior to a decade or two ago.
Yeah. It's also moving the learning agenda as well. That is our core work in the sense that we're taking a look at competency-based curriculum at K to 12, along with competency-based assessments, and what does that look like? How are we redefining all of those pieces in a classroom?
Yeah, and defining them in classrooms that are constantly shifting and changing.
Yeah.
I like that there's so many moving parts to the school board system or to the school system. What is one of your favorite aspects of the work that you do? As an administrator or as a teacher?
Yes.
I'll ask you that as a professional question first, but then I'm going to go to the personal question next.
So I think that in my current role, that my favorite part is being out in schools and talking to administrators and teachers and being into classrooms. And as I'm saying that, I recognize I don't get a chance to do that enough. I also think part of my favorite role in education, as a site-based principal, being able to look after a school family and taking care of that school family and the culture in a school, I felt super responsible. There was lots of responsibility around that, but it was really fulfilling work. And in this role, it shifts a little bit in that our family is our principals and vice principals, and how can we support them to do the work to look after their schools. Right?
Do you find that even though you've bumped up a scale as far as the hierarchy of the way that the school's system works, the work is the same? The overlying principles are the same. You're just doing it at another level now?
Yeah, and I'm not sure even hierarchy. It's just we are all learners, right? And we're all learning, and it's reciprocal, right?
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. So as we make this commitment as we go into education to be a lifelong learner and to learn alongside our colleagues and our students. So.
Yeah, and I'm even learning from you. I'm like, oh gosh, you're right. I shouldn't be referring to it as a hierarchy that way. It's sort of like a very classic colonial way of thinking about things, and maybe that's also something I need to look at.
Well, I don't think there is a bit of there is hierarchy there, but I don't. Yeah,
all sorts of philosophical questions coming through. But okay, what about Paula, the woman, the person? What do you see for your future as you? What do you want to do?
Just an ever so slight spoiler alert here. Since Paula and I shot this interview last summer, she has begun another educational journey of her own, and I can't wait to have her back in future to talk about that. But she is currently in the process of obtaining her educational doctorate as well. Amazing.
Oh, that's a big question.
I know, right? Because we never really think about ourselves.
I think it goes back to my why, probably, and the why about. I think about the reason I do that, and it revolves around the word commitment, I think, and so it's the commitment sort of that I have in my personal life, right, and also a commitment that I hold professionally as well, and I know it sounds sort of morbid, but it's like, what will people say about you, right? After
How will you be remembered?
After you leave, right? And it's that legacy piece. And so I'm hopeful that, you know, sometimes when we get wrapped up in the daily tasks, that those pieces aren't recognized, but it's the recognition of, hey, my role is around, you know, how do I support and honor Mike, right? And how am I a good mom and a good daughter and sister and friend, teammate? And so those are all kind of the personal pieces, right? But then how have I left a lasting impact with respect to the culture of our district, and move learning forward?
Yeah.
Right.
So that, you know, it must feel, you must feel proud. I would feel proud at having, you know, at doing that kind of work and making a difference in that way, whilst also maintaining a commitment to live well. Would you have any words of advice for yourself, say 20 years ago? And if so, what would they be?
Yeah, that's good. I think probably to enter kind of, whether it's relationships or conversations or opportunities with wonder, right? And ask good questions.
That is such an important piece to put together. That humility and that wonder is what takes away, in a sense, your preconceived biases. And that is what great leaders really ought to be doing. I'm so inspired by my conversation with Paula today.
Questions, because if we come from that humble place, and you know, in my younger years, I'm not sure I was always that humble.
Okay.
Right? Not about, but just, you know, when you the more you realize that you come to know, the more you realize that you don't know. Right?
Isn't that the truth?
So true. Yeah. And so I think probably that would be the advice I would give my younger self.
Okay. Yeah.
And that it all doesn't have to be finished in the day, right?
Oh, right. You can take a break. Okay. And lastly, to young women watching this, what would be some of your words of encouragement just moving forward? And, you know, the world of 2020 is pretty rough. I know many of my young students at university have really been struggling with their day-to-day, you know, completing assignments and getting things done. I've tried to handle them, you know, or try to handle our situations with a lot of compassion.
Yes,
What are some of your strategies for that? I know you're not directly working with students right now, but you did for quite a long time.
Yeah, I think that the word that you used is a good one, Carin. It's around compassion and grace, right? And keeping the conversation going. I think that probably in our younger years, probably we didn't really talk about things, right? It was put your head down and push through, right?
Good point.
And that's not necessarily the most healthy or productive way to get to the end of the road in a good way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just being open and vulnerable, right? Brene Brown talks about rumbling with vulnerability, and I think as women, we that rumble part, we struggle with that a little bit because it, you know, when somebody says, let's get ready to rumble, what does that mean? It's not about, right, but it's about what she means is about committing to being vulnerable and committing to coming to conversations with wonder and asking questions and, right? So I think, and that it's okay to show vulnerability. That's being humble and humility.
Beautiful words. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you for the work that you do in our school district.
I'm not sure if it's wisdom, but it's definitely, thanks for asking me. Thanks for asking me, Carin. I feel very honored to be here to share a little bit and know that the imprints of women that have come before, right?
Yeah.
So my grannies, right, and my mom and my
Absolutely.
sisters, right? They all play a role in who I am, and hopefully hopefully I'm speaking some truths for them as well.
Oh, I love it. And I just love how there's that approach of family and matriarchy and togetherness in that. Thank you so much, Paula.
Thanks, Carin.